Welcome to Mojo, Motivation and Mental Health, where we have conversations that change lives. I'm Mike Orlowski. Before we start, if you're struggling with anxiety, panic attacks, thoughts of harming yourself, please reach out. Call or text 988, the Suicide and Crisis Hotline. If it's an emergency, call 911. You're not alone. Help is available, and you matter. If this show does help you, or if there's someone out there that you think it might help, please please share it. We want to spread the word far and wide. Hit that subscribe button and make sure to leave a review. Your support helps us more than you know. Now, today's conversation is about living with anxiety that started in childhood and never really went away, and what it's like to support someone else through life-threatening health crises while managing your own invisible illness. My guest is Jackie Lauricella Perry, a former athletic trainer, now a professional photographer, and the wife of Josh Perry, who you might remember from a recent episode. Josh survived multiple brain tumors and awake brain surgery. His brother died about 8 years ago, and through all of it, Jackie was there, not trying to fix anything, just creating space for Josh to be fully himself while dealing with their own mental health challenges. We're going to talk about what it means to be a caregiver when you're also struggling, how radical acceptance creates safe relationships, and why your body doesn't lie, even when your mind tries to convince you that everything's fine. Jackie, thanks for being here.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this conversation. Anything that brings more light to mental health, I'm here for it.
I appreciate it. I'm excited as well. I can relate to a lot of this, having had anxiety since childhood and seeing that in some of my family members as well. It's a much more common challenge for people than most realize. So this is an important conversation. Now, Jackie, you've dealt with anxiety since you were a kid, and again, I know what that's like. It's a long time to carry it. What do you remember about when it started, what anxiety looked like for you as a kid, and what that process was like as you got a little older?
I think it's funny because, when you're a child, even though my dad had his own anxiety issues and mental health issues, it's not necessarily labeled as anxiety, or at least it
Hmm.
wasn't in the 90s.
Right.
But it wasn't necessarily labeled as anxiety. It was like, oh, I get really nervous before I go to
Hmm.
sleep, or oh,
Hmm.
I don't like falling asleep by myself. But it looking back now and then talking to my parents, I can see it was like, oh, I was having panic attacks before I went to bed because I would have night terrors and experience that, and
Hmm.
have really strange fears for kids that age, that people were going to break in the house and, hurt my family. And, so it was a lot of strange terror and worry that didn't necessarily correlate with my age. Cause I'm talking like 4 or 5 years old. I'm not watching
Hmm.
crazy movies where people are coming
Right.
in.
Right.
So it's like, what are these ideas coming from? Did I hear it on the news and then internalize it and then freak out about it? So there was a lot of that. And then I started training in Taekwondo at a really young age.
Hmm.
I'd say around 7 or 8, and I would get super anxious and have panic attacks before we had to run. So being on the competition team, we would do a mile run before practice
Hmm.
sometimes, and on the days where I knew we were gonna run, I had asthma that I grew out of and stuff, so running has never been fun for me. I'm not a runner. I can
Hmm.
sprint, that's fine, but any kind of distance running, that runner's high, I don't know what people are
Yeah.
talking about, you know what I
I don't have that.
mean?
No.
I don't have that. That skipped me, um, and it's been like that since I was little, so being, like, very out of breath was very scary for me. And I'd love to say, my parents were just crazy and pushing me into it, but my mom, I remember, would be like, "You don't have to do this. Like, we can go home." Like this, she was saw because it wasn't just a kid freaking out because they didn't want to do it. It was genuinely me having a panic attack before running a mile because I didn't like the way it made me feel, So moments like that, I can look back now on and I can be like, wow, that was a lot of anxiety and a lot of self-internalized pressure and things like that that I put on myself even at a really young age.
You mentioned some things that it brings back some memories to me, and I had forgotten about, but I remember my mom talking about occasionally having night terrors for me when I was a kid. And roughly 5 years old is about when I remember her saying it. I don't remember any of that, but I know that was something that happened over a certain period of time. But the same thing, before we would have to do like climb the rope in gym class or something I just didn't feel confident in, the anxiety was there. And it doesn't just stay in your head, it shows up physically: numbness, breathing difficulty, the night terrors, disordered eating. How did your body and how does your body respond to anxiety?
Then it was very fleeting. It was like in those moments and it would be this big explosive thing and then it would kind of go away. I don't think the type of anxiety I dealt with became more chronic until I was probably in college. So looking back in high school and stuff, it would be like these big moments and it would be very physical. It would manifest
Hmm.
itself as like a full blown panic attack, not necessarily losing consciousness to the people around me, but like blacking out and then coming to and not realizing like how I got where I was and, things like that. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't ever remember having that happen. But I do remember some of the fear, and it was
Right.
stifling, I think is a good word. And it's hard to describe what it felt like back then, but it was just intense fear, miserable. Now we've talked about this, and you said you have experience with the gut anxiety connection, and that 90% of the body's serotonin is produced in the gut. What's that connection like for you? What have you learned about it? And I know my son, we learned that about him in his teens, as well, and something I didn't know before that.
Yeah, the importance of gut health is huge. And with my healing journey and my mental health journey, they have correlated. I have dealt with disordered eating for a lot of my life as well. But
Hmm.
when I finally did some blood testing and figured out that I had sensitivities to certain things, and then I cut them out, like 3 months after cutting them out, it was like night and day, like how I felt on a daily basis. If your gut is regularly in distress and it's inflamed, it's way harder to just be in a state of homeostasis. And I think the sooner somebody can get their body into a place of homeostasis, as far as my stomach's not hurt, I feel good physically, like I've been moving my body, then all of a sudden mental health becomes more manageable, right?
Hmm.
But if you're constantly in this state where my stomach's upset, it's cramping, I don't feel good, then it's really hard to pull yourself out of it because even if you mentally feel okay, you might not physically feel okay that day. And then I don't know about you, but it's really hard for me to feel mentally okay when I don't feel physically okay.
Absolutely has an impact. Yeah. And that was the same when my son was struggling with that as a teen. It might have been even as he was maybe 9 or 10, but it was all starting in the stomach, and we had no idea for years. Thankfully, found a neurologist whose son had the same challenges, and that he figured it out pretty quickly at that point. But it took years to identify because a lot of doctors don't even know.
Yeah, that's really fortunate. And I think that also your cells are constantly changing and replicating. You're like essentially like a new person on a cellular level every 10 years or something. So I might not have had stomach issues when I was a kid, but as I started dealing with a more chronic anxiety, as disordered eating started taking over a little bit more, I developed some autoimmune issues and sensitivities.
Hmm.
Like I can't really do gluten. Like I'm not celiac, fortunately, so it's not as dramatic. But if I incorporate gluten into my diet once or twice, like the way I feel and the way my stomach is way different than if I just hold off on it entirely, or eggs are one for me. Like if they're used
Mm,
as an emulsifier in a sauce or in a batch of cookies where you're getting 12 cookies with one egg, like
yeah.
I can maybe have a cookie, but if I'm just eating eggs, it it makes me physically feel bad in a way that it's not just a stomach upset. It's like I could have gastrointestinal, like reflux,
Mm,
get headaches, and then it's like then I'm in a place where the anxiety that I dealt with was so physical. It was like, wait, am I anxious? Because it was, like I'm having this acid reflux, my stomach's upset, I feel very unsettled, I don't feel good, and then that's kind of how I felt when I felt anxious. So it's
right.
all this loop where it's like, do I feel okay and I just ate something maybe I shouldn't have? Or am I anxious and I have to worry? So it's just easier to eliminate those things and to put your body in a good place. That way you can mentally kind of figure out where you're at a little bit more clearly.
Yeah. Makes sense because it becomes a cycle at that point, and that's how it was for my son. And man, I had eggs this morning and yesterday morning, so I'd be struggling if I couldn't eat eggs. I
Eggs
absolutely
were
love to eat them,
really
but
hard for me. Yeah, eggs were
yeah.
the eggs were almost harder than gluten for me. And that's
Ugh,
coming from an Italian girl whose family eats like pasta and pizza constantly. But eggs, I'm
yeah.
not like a sweet breakfast kind of girl. So it was daily
Yeah.
eggs. But that also explains why I felt so much better when I cut them out of my diet.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm usually an every other day person. I try to rotate, but yeah, me and the dog like having our eggs when we do have them. My dog absolutely loves eggs. You did talk about disordered eating. And when did that happen, and what was that like? Because I mean, I can't say I can relate to that. I've not had that. Well, my eating disorder is probably eating too much and just struggling to not eat.
Yeah, I mean, that's a little bit of mine as well. So I dealt with binge eating disorder and bulimia, and
Hmm.
it started as a way to manage my weight when I was in a weight controlled sport, when I was in taekwondo. So I need to make weight, but I really want to have this thing. So I do that and then make myself throw up. And then maybe I wasn't doing it instantly. And that doesn't mean it's okay. It was just one of those things where I was struggling and I had support systems around me, but I didn't want to disappoint them. I was looked at as a very confident, capable person. I was an athlete. I was training 6 days a week for hours a day and being successful at competitions as well. So it was not something that I was ready to admit to the world. So I didn't utilize the resources, not because I didn't have them, but because I was afraid of that failure, that disappointment. And then it kind of, like a lot of things do, morphed into a coping mechanism. So by
Hmm.
the time that I was in college, it wasn't necessarily about, oh, I want to eat this thing and then not. It was, I'm stressed out and I want to turn off my brain. I don't want to think about anything. So I'm going to binge eat a bunch of food because that is not only a dopamine release, but it is, I can just numb myself, like literally just turn off my brain and numb myself and eat. And then it was the purging part was
Hmm.
almost like a, sounds weird, but it was like a punishment for myself. It was like, you couldn't control yourself. You did this to yourself. Now you need to fix it because we have things
Yeah.
to do. We can't. And it just
Right.
spiraled. So it became something that I was dealing with. Even though I felt better, I wasn't as anxious anymore. I wasn't having panic attacks. It was still something that I just kept to myself and honestly reached its peak in like 2023, 2024. So that was
Mm.
something that I carried with me since I
Yeah.
was like 18 years old.
And how did you get past it? What was it that the steps you took that were usable to say, okay, I'm not doing that anymore?
Therapy. Yeah. I went to a therapist who specializes in disordered eating. I worked with a nutritionist and a dietitian. I it just became to a point, honestly, where Josh and I were talking about having children, and I thought about how my dad was always somebody who dealt with anxiety, but didn't necessarily
Hmm.
share that with me, but I still ended up with it
Sure.
anyways. And
Yep.
I could not stomach the idea of subconsciously passing something that was tormenting me to my
Hmm.
child. Like I just couldn't.
Yeah.
That was like a hard stop for me. So I would like to say that I was my own motivator and I did, but I don't know if I would have had that push to really do something about it. Unless we were, how do I word? I wouldn't have, I don't know if I would have had the push to do something about it if Josh and I weren't in conversations about having children.
And that's okay. That was the impetus, right? That's the motivating factor that kind of got you there, and that's okay because there's a lot of people that struggle with that
Yeah.
today. Gymnasts, wrestlers, probably ice skaters. There's competitive sports where they have to make sure that they're thin or certain weights, or they get shamed. And some of these sports are brutal. You hear about the stories coming out of them. So I know it's a prevalent issue for many. So it's an important topic, and I think the key here is don't be afraid to talk to somebody and go to therapy for it.
Yeah. And I think an important point, especially for me, is that I was in that place where I was an athlete and then I became a medical health professional. And then it
Hmm.
was like, I should know better. I have all the resources at my disposal to not be doing this. I even know tools on how to not be doing this and so
Hmm.
it was like it became this point of shame and it became this point of you should know better, so just fix it. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it was like there was
Yeah.
this like idea that I can control it, but really it was like if I had the tools to fix it, I would have like a long time
Yeah.
ago. So I just
Right.
needed outside help. I just
Because some of this was going on during college. Then you lost a friend suddenly in college, right? And that intensified everything. How did that loss change your anxiety? Did it affect your anxiety? Did it affect your disordered eating? How did that all connect?
yeah, so I think it was a year, maybe 2 after I left home,
Hmm.
and it was one of my former coaches, instructors who was quite young. I was 18 or 19 and they were probably in their early 30s.
Hmm.
Um, his wife, who I knew, and she was just this wonderful person. She went to work one day, and just didn't come home. She had like a very sudden, I believe it was a brain aneurysm. Um, and of course, like it affected him, it affected her child and the people around her and her parent. Like it, something so shocking like that. And it really hit me in a strange way where it was like a catalyst almost. It changed the anxiety that I was dealing with from being more performance based, being about how I wasn't doing enough, how I needed to do more, how I needed to succeed. And then it became like my body could betray me at any minute. And
Mm.
then it became about my health and me. And so it morphed into this maybe I'm dying, like, mentality, and it was a really strange flip for me because I'd always, we've spoken about it. I've always been like a very healthy, active person. The least healthy thing I was doing was disordered eating, and it wasn't super frequent then. So it was like I was going to doctors. I was convinced that I had all these things wrong with me. And I'd go to doctors and they tell me I'm fine, and I like wouldn't believe them. And had a bit of hypochondria, but then would also know at some part in the back of my head, like, no, you're okay. So it was just this weird position that I found myself in where all of a sudden it was like I wasn't safe in my own body. And that was a huge turning point for me. And then it became um, like a chronic anxiety issue, panic attack
Hmm.
very regularly. That's when it really started to interfere with my daily life.
And was that also part of the what drove you in to decide to go to therapy, or was that later on? It sounds
Therapy
like that
was
was later on.
Yeah, therapy was like 10 years later, honestly.
Okay.
I went and spoke to a doctor about it and told them that I was experiencing anxiety, and they put me on an SSRI, and that's probably as
Hmm.
close to help as you can get. And I don't know if you know this, but SSRIs are actually like problematic for people that have gut issues and things like that. So
Yes, I had heard that.
yeah, it can be an issue. I started to experiencing some like stomach problems, and they turned me into a bit of a zombie. And I know that SSRIs
Hmm.
can also be an issue with people that are neurodivergent. I've never been
Hmm.
diagnosed, but I'm pretty sure I have some kind of ADHD or something going on, and that has
Hmm.
nothing to do with personality type. But and I say this, I wouldn't do this now, but somebody offered me a study aid when I was in college, um,
Uh-huh.
a Vyvanse, and I was like, which is essentially like an Adderall. I was like, "Yeah, this will be great," and I took it, and then I had like the best nap of my life. Like I went to sleep, and
Mm.
people are like, "I
Oh
don't
wow.
understand how you
Yeah.
went to sleep." Like, well, you're on a
Yeah.
60
Right.
milligram. Yeah,
That's the opposite.
yeah. So I was like, maybe I have some ADHD. So the SSRIs, while I took them, they made me feel really bad. And
Hmm.
so I struggled with taking them. I would stop taking them and then I would start again. So it was just wasn't the greatest solution for me because I didn't have the tools at the
Sure. And you got into training, right? You were a trainer when you met Josh.
time.
Is
Yeah.
that correct?
So my bachelor's degree is in athletic training. And then I met Josh when I was going to graduate school remotely, but working at the like action sports facility that he was training at here in North Carolina. And I was getting my degree in sports psychology. And I actually convinced him that he needed to get his ACL repaired. He had been riding on a torn ACL and just for lack of a better word, a janky knee for like 2 years. And
Mm.
I convinced
Hmm.
him that he
Yeah.
really needed to get it fixed. Yeah.
And obviously, he survived multiple brain tumors and surgery while he was awake. And his brother also died about 8 years ago. And you were there through all of it. What is it like to be in that caregiver role, helping getting him through all that, but also struggling with your own mental health?
Yeah, that was so his brother Danny passed in 2018 and it was very sudden and it was very violent. And so I was 26, 27. We'd really only
Hmm.
been dating about a year. We were friends
Okay.
for a few years before that, but we'd really only been together for a year. I guess it's fortunately for me, but when under stress or pressure, I perform really well. It is a strength
Mm-hmm.
of mine. So I went into
Yeah.
just doing. I was like, how can I help this family? How can I aid them? What can I do for them? So I went into action mode
Mhm.
almost instantly, and I stayed that way for a few months.
Mhm.
And helping I wish I could say I knew what I was doing when I was helping Josh through it, but simple things like making sure Danny's body was cared for and in the right location after he passed so that his mom wouldn't have to deal with that. Like things like that is where I stepped in and picked up the pieces, helping plan his memorial service, all those things where it's like if you've just lost your child or if you've just lost your brother, like you're not going to think like what kind of space can we rent to celebrate his life? Like it's just it's
Right.
the last thing you want to
Yeah,
think about. So
of course.
I saw openings where I could be helpful, and I did it. Um, and it was also interesting to help Josh through that because you never want to tell someone how they're feeling or what they're going through. Josh is also this person who has like described to me like how he feels when like turbulence on an airplane happens. And he's like, my palms are sweaty and I don't feel good and I start to get nauseous. And I'm like, yeah, you're anxious. And he's like, no. And I'm
Yeah. That's kind of the definition, but yeah,
like, if you don't want to call it that, we don't have to call it that. You know what I mean? So
sure. Yeah.
after Danny passed, even like a year later, he was like, I just don't have interest in the things that I'm doing anymore. It's hard for me to get out of bed. Sometimes I don't even want to get up. And essentially, like describing to me that he was depressed.
Mhm.
And, it's when you want someone to feel better, telling them that they're depressed isn't necessarily like the best thing to do, but
Right.
also needing for them to be informed because depression can be very dangerous.
Absolutely.
Making sure that he felt supported and that he knew, like, hey, I think we're kind of treading this line where you need to
Mhm.
be aware that what you're describing is depression. And if you start having thoughts of X, Y, or Z, then you need to make sure you go talk to somebody. So I think that with Josh and being there for them, I was trying to give him space and let him do the things that he wanted to do while also just like looking for areas where I could help where I wasn't being too overbearing or too involved because it death brings out a lot of really interesting behaviors in people.
Sure does. And it's different for everybody.
Yeah, the grieving process and stuff. And I'm not even talking about like Josh and his mom who were really some of the only family that Danny had left, but some of his friends feeling very entitled to his things or,
Mm.
like just some things that I would deem really inappropriate. But I'm like, you try and remind yourself that people are grieving and they're doing their best. But it was a really hard thing to get through on for so many different reasons. Yeah.
Sure. Absolutely. And then obviously from there led into brain surgery and brain tumors and helping Josh along that journey that continues, right? And I think what's key about it is that your relationship, and Josh explained this too, it's built on radical acceptance, not conditional love, just it is or isn't. What does radical acceptance mean to you? How does your relationship work like that in practice?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the first step in acceptance is, are you a baseball fan?
Yeah, oh yeah. Both my kids both played, and I
Amazing.
played. Yeah, I had baseball on every night.
So this is how I relate it with baseball. When you are in a dugout, like when I would sit in a dugout being an athletic trainer, an athletic training student,
Hmm.
you have to have something that they call feel when you're in the dugout. And if you
Hmm.
don't have feel, you're going to get kicked out of that dugout really quick. And having feel essentially means being able to read the room. Don't go up and talk to a pitcher after they just had a really bad inning and they're sitting there and they're stewing in their head. Like, leave them be, let
Right.
the right person talk to them. Like, let's not be like laughing and giggling and trying to crack jokes if the tone is very serious. That
Hmm.
kind of thing. I think being able to read a room is a very useful talent to have. And I think you can apply it to a lot of situations. And it helps a lot in relationships. Because if you can read a room and you can see how someone's behaving and acting, then it's not about you, if
Yeah.
that makes sense. You can see it and you can be like, oh,
Yeah.
maybe they feel a certain way. This doesn't have anything to do with me, but I can choose how I respond to it.
Right.
Yeah. So radical acceptance, I think, starts with observing through a non biased lens and knowing that
Hmm.
the way people are acting doesn't necessarily have anything to do with you, even if they say it does.
Sure.
So
You're right.
yeah. So even if they're like, well, I'm only doing this because you did that. And it's like, okay. in my mind, maybe that's not equal. Like your reaction seems too much to that. But then it's being curious, asking questions, that kind of thing,
Hmm.
like observing a behavior, knowing that it might not necessarily have anything to do with you, and then asking questions to gain clarity. I think that's where you start. And then where you finish is kind of like you can't judge a person based on their responses. Like you asked. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah. Right.
then it's like, okay, we accept them. And is this something that we're changing and adjusting? Is this something we need to grow through? Or is this just you have an opinion and it is what it is and we can't move on from that? So it is about being more discerning and more observant than I think people give it credit for because acceptance almost kind of just sounds like I'm accepting this.
Right.
Like, like it's
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
but the
Right.
truth is with acceptance is I can have my own boundaries and my own
Hmm.
expectations of my life partner and the person that I'm building a life with, but I don't get to say, "Oh, they're not meeting my expectations," before I read a room, before I'm curious about it, before there's a discussion about it. And then at that point, it's like, "This doesn't violate any of my boundaries. I accept you for where you are. Let's move forward with this together." Does that make sense?
No, absolutely. I mean, when I was depressed and struggling with depression, it was much more difficult to have those boundaries and to understand reading the room.
Yeah.
And I'm really good at reading the room when it comes to the work and the business world side of things, but I'm not real good at reading the room at home. I've been married going on 28 years. I'm getting better at it, but I think at the same time, being a fixer and I'm stubborn, I'm half Polish, half Italian. It's the fixer mentality definitely gets me in trouble. So I need to and have been working on that the last several years to realize, hey, maybe my wife had a bad day at work and I need to realize that and take a little bit different approach and not just be a bull in a china shop, which I've been known to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's I can be the same way. And because I am very good at reading a room and
Hmm.
I don't know, we'll just call him Josh, like this other amorphous thing that's definitely not my husband. He can be upset and in a bad mood and then deny that he's in a bad mood and then get upset when I'm like, I think you're in a bad mood. So it's like, but
Yeah.
then, an hour later, he's like, yeah, I was kind of in a mood. And I'm like, oh, really?
Yeah.
Sometimes
You
reading
don't say.
is it's not always helpful, so you just have to that's when real feel comes in and you gotta learn to just be like, "Okay, you're not in a bad mood. That's totally fine." And when a person is actually in a better mood, they can come back and be like, "I was irritated earlier," or "I had a really hard day," or "I didn't," but I think the growth comes in, like, labeling and the conversation afterwards and learning you don't always have to push that on someone because I do that too. Like, that accountability, that not necessarily the desire to fix it, but I'm like, "Just be honest with yourself." You know what I mean? And so I'm like,
Yeah. Yeah.
"Just figure it out."
One of the biggest things that helped me coming out of depressions was realizing that I didn't need to take it personally when others had certain actions or words that they used because you've even mentioned the same thing. Maybe they had a bad day, or maybe it's not you, it's them, and it's just their way of manifesting the moment. So and a lot of people out there that are listening are going to feel this and say, maybe I can take a different angle and not take it personal. And honestly, in this world with the way politics are, we take everything personal, and when in reality we need to take a step back and realize we're not so dissimilar. We actually have very much in common. And we got to realize what they're saying isn't directed necessarily at us. And it could be going through something that day. And we need to just recognize that and not let it affect us and move on.
Yeah, it's easier said than done, because
Sure.
I think a lot of people too, even if they're very confident people and they're not necessarily internalizing what a lot of people are saying, those confident people will still have individuals in their life that they have assigned importance. So that means that they have labeled them as an important person.
Hmm.
If that person says something, it can stick with them for years and affect them.
Absolutely.
So I would
Yeah.
put myself in that category. Like, I'm a very confident person. If I don't know you off the street, your opinion of me doesn't really like it doesn't influence me. But there are people in my life that I have deemed important and that I have huge respect for. And some of the things that they have said to me have stuck with me. really big part of healing, I think, is to look back on that and know that it might have just been something that they said in passing. Like they didn't mean for it to be so impactful. They didn't mean for it to
Right.
not necessarily mean what it did, but, it wasn't as big of a deal to them. But maybe it reaffirmed this belief you already had about yourself and it like stuck with you even more. Like sometimes, like the most negative, ugly things that we think about ourselves, if someone even says it out loud without any prompting, even without any malice, like, man, that hits hard and weird. So, coming to terms with the idea that everybody is their own main character and the way you're moving around in your life and perceiving things is not the same as how other people are. That's a huge it's like a cage door opening almost. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it's a freedom of a lot of expectation and a lot of pressure that you put on yourself because nobody's thinking about you the way you're thinking about you.
100%. And we don't realize that in the moment. You know what I mean? And I didn't realize that for 45 years, to the point to where I went the other way and I was like, I don't really care what they think anymore. It's like, I'm going to be happy anyway. And sometimes that's a detriment because it may be somebody that I do respect, but at the same time, like, you're not going to change my mood. I'm going to be happy in 5 minutes. It's
Right.
just the way I am now. Yeah, you're right. I mean, it's a interesting dynamic. Now, something that I think can be helpful to others listening, and we touched on earlier, but you did therapy, and now you and Josh do couples therapy every other week, and he's talked about it a couple of times, and not because you're in crisis, but as preventive or proactive maintenance, right? Why is that important, and what does being proactive with therapy do that maybe reactive cannot?
I think that if you find yourself to be in a relationship and you are two people that are interested in growth and interested in maintaining a positive relationship, then you also know that you are growing and changing quite regularly. Learning
Yes.
how to communicate is an excellent skill to have. And if you learn
Hmm.
about it in couples therapy, like there are moments where I'm applying it in other relationships in my life as well. And I find it
Hmm.
super helpful because some of it is those lessons of, ooh, you are really taking what they're saying through your own lens rather than just
Hmm.
hearing what they're saying. And that can be important. That can, some follow up questions sometimes are necessary no matter what relationship in your life you're dealing with. So I think that's a really good place to start. And also learning more about your partner is
Hmm.
helpful. And sometimes the way I would ask Josh a question or my perception or what I already know about him would keep me from asking a question just right for him to realize someone or something. But having someone else there, having a third party that's able to like see past some of the things that I can't and that even he can't, that's really helpful because it's opened a lot of doors. We've had a lot of like aha moments
Hmm.
where it was like, oh, we've communicated about this so many times and we're okay with it, but I never really understood what you meant. I just accepted it,
Mm. Yeah.
but now I can really understand where you're coming from and where you're at with this, you know? So that's helpful.
Yeah. Well, and we're at least most men are stubborn. A lot of us are. We don't want to go to therapy. We don't think we need it. Been there with the conversation before, and I know people that also have been there. And it's one of those things that we just need to, as a society, accept the fact of our brain is one of the most important parts of our body, and therapy is a way of helping lighten the load on our brain and loosen it up and open us up to new possibilities. And it's not a bad thing.
Yeah, or at least give tangibles. Because sometimes you're at an impasse, right? And you and your partner aren't going to
Hmm.
agree on everything, and it's like, okay, we're
Hmm.
here at this standstill. And if you're in it, if you're in the thick of it, like you're like, I don't know what to do. I've tried everything, but the reality is you haven't tried everything because there's a third party that can show you, like, okay, hey, we don't need to fix this. Like we actually can keep our separate opinions but let's have these expectations of how it's going to affect our life moving forward. And if it's like, oh, it's not really, or it's like, oh, actually, we can have these two separate opinions. And then when we have boundaries and rules for our life, they line up and it's fine. You know what I mean? Or, they don't line up and there's other work to be done. But I think it's a huge relief in knowing like I can disagree with my partner, but it doesn't necessarily change how we would raise our child. It doesn't necessarily change the boundaries that we set with a parent. So those things you don't have to agree to come to similar conclusions. And that can be
Hmm.
really hard to see when you're in the thick of it. Really, really hard.
Oh, especially when you're a stubborn Polish Italian man
Yeah.
who gets a little hot-headed and just responds really quick without thinking it through. Yes, I understand. I know you're both expecting a baby in July.
Yeah.
How has now, and congratulations, it's exciting. It's been so long. My daughter's 21, so it's been a long time. Uh, you're navigating that now, right? How do hormonal changes affect your anxiety, and how has pregnancy changed or not changed your mental health?
I did, Josh and I both, and myself. So I really went to therapy starting in 2023 to
Hmm.
work on binge eating, bulimia, anxiety. I wasn't experiencing anxiety as much anymore. A lot of it I
Hmm.
was really masking with the binge eating and the bulimia. I was like turning off my brain. I just wasn't really myself. And I can see that now. Like looking back now, I'm like, oh, I can see how insecure and unsettled and everything I was in my life. But
Hmm.
the therapy that I started was so helpful and such a game changer that even now, as my body is changing and having really gnarly body dysmorphia and not realizing it, when you go from being an athlete that has really low body fat, and I used to fight featherweight, so I was making 125 pounds, like, then now being an adult woman who isn't
Hmm.
starving herself anymore, like that number looks very different. My body looks very different. On top
Hmm.
of it, having disordered eating that causes your body to panic and hold on to a bunch of weight. I was very nervous and cognizant about how am I going to be affected mentally when my body is changing being pregnant. And I feel so good about it. It's so interesting because doing this work has told me, like, hey, your body's supposed to change. It makes
Hmm.
total sense that your body is not the same size as it was when you were exercising 30 hours a week when you were 25.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely.
yeah, almost a more realistic, I hate to say realistic because the mental health and the things you tell yourself are very real and serious, especially when you have disordered eating. But my therapist did something where she labeled the eating disorder voice as that, like a separate voice in my head. Like, that's not you. That's the eating disorder voice fighting change. That's the eating disorder voice telling you you don't deserve this. But getting these messages of, you're somehow a failure because your body is different. And then being
Hmm.
able to go back and be like, where did that belief actually come from? Is it a reasonable thing to actually still believe in my life now? And should I carry that with me?
Hmm.
Like, no, that's not, like, it doesn't mean that I'm a failure because my body is larger. Like, that's not something that serves me, and that's not something that logically pertains to my life anymore. And if anything, it's like my body is bigger because I'm growing a baby. And that's like
Yes.
exactly what it should be doing. And exactly like
Yes.
what's keeping my baby healthy and safe and me good. Like I'm still as health conscious as I've always been. So like avoiding things like gestational diabetes and preeclampsia and things like that and doing those things.
Hmm.
I'm doing all that and knowing that my doctor is really happy with where I'm at. I'm like, then why am I going to be worried about it? You know?
Right. Because most people are, because our mind automatically goes down that path, right? And we have to fight back to it, right? Talk back to it in the different one, reframe it so that we understand it's okay. This is part of the process and it's part of evolving.
And there was a huge part of me that I went through this therapy and I did this and like a year and a half later and I was like, "Oh my gosh, it's crazy how much better I feel. I feel like myself." And then there was
Hmm.
this whole new fear of I feel like myself again. I feel so good. Now what am I going
Hmm.
to do? I'm going to get knocked up and gain 30 pounds and then like have some baby that's dependent on me for years and years. And so many women struggle with losing themselves in motherhood and taking a really long time to find their way back around to their own self and their own identity. And that was really scary for me. Like, I
Hmm.
almost was like, I don't know if I want to do this because of that. I I value my independence and just my freedom very, very much. My relationship is structured where I'm not checking in with people, letting them know where I am. Josh doesn't control what I do. Like we are very much a team. Like and without trying, children very much control what you do. And that's just to be
Sure.
expected, especially when they're little
Yeah.
and they're dependent on you. And that's just,
Right.
I can't lie to myself about how that's not actually a thing. Like, it's a thing. And I had to come to terms with that as well and be like, okay, no, motherhood doesn't have to look like the scariest version of motherhood that I've seen.
Right.
And I can approach it with realism and logic, and also take steps to ensure that I'm treating myself in a way that I know will be beneficial for me in the long run.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, having been there, from our perspective, it was one of the most amazing times we've ever experienced. And yes, not without challenges, but it's just a different kind of, for us, it was a different kind of fun. Watching them grow and from that baby to crawling to walking to doing all the things and then doing the things that we did as kids and playing baseball or softball or soccer or basketball, whatever it might be, or riding a BMX bike or taekwondo. I mean, it it's kind of like becoming the mini version of watching ourselves, and it's a whole different level of fun. And I mean, I wouldn't have traded it for the world. It was so much fun.
Yeah, and I'm so excited about that, and I'm like, seeing life through children's eyes has always been really special for me. I always taught martial arts when I was younger. I coached and ran summer camps and did all that, and like, kids are just, they're such a hoot. They're so fun to be around. So I know that this season of our life is going to be filled with a lot of joy. I'm very excited to see my parents as grandparents. I'm very
Hmm.
excited the fact that they're in Florida, but it's forcing them to migrate up here because I'm an only
Mm,
child and they're going to to move when I, tempt them with
nice.
grandchildren. They're like, okay, yeah, I'm on my way. I'm very grateful for all of this. And I also realize, like you said, it can be better. Like, it doesn't have to be the worst case scenario. It doesn't have to be like, oh, people say a lot of things, pregnant women, and people say a lot of things to expecting parents, like, "Oh, you're tired now, just wait," or, and it's like, can't can't you just let people like have their head in the clouds a little bit and just be excited, or just say they're tired? Like, stop telling pregnant women, just wait until the baby gets here. You think you're tired now? Like, just let her be pregnant and let her be tired. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a different kind of tired. I mean, we're tired through all the phases of our lives, and it's like I think we just use that as a way to make us feel better in the moment. When in reality, we're just as tired when they're babies as we were when we were pregnant, and we're just as tired now in my 50s as I was when they were teenagers. I mean, just a different part of my life. I'm still just as tired.
Yeah,
Doesn't
absolutely.
matter.
Yeah, you're either hustling because you're working and it's business, or then you have a kid, or then they're teenagers, and then you
Hmm.
might get a little bit more free time. I know my parents, like, the second I moved out, they were like going out every weekend. All of a sudden, they had the expensive cheese in their fridge. I was like, "What is this? Like, why wasn't this when I was here?" You know what I mean? So I know
Yep.
it's a really short portion of your life too. Like, 18 years sounds like a lot. It's not a lot, and then your relationship with your children, they're still your children, but it's very different. So I can see
Yes.
nothing lasts forever. Everything is very temporary, and like, people like dread the newborn stage, and it's like, but like a year later and you're out of it, and then people miss it.
I loved it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, they're like,
I loved it.
oh my gosh, this 2-year-old's crazy. I wish we were back in the newborn stage. So I just
Right.
think I saw something once that was saying like depression is living in the past and anxiety is living in the future. And
Hmm.
the magic of being present is really where like peace is. And I just loved that. And I was like,
Absolutely.
yeah, I'm just gonna be as present as I possibly can and make decisions that are the
Hmm.
best for me and my family and my mental health. And if that means I get to be a little bit more independent, I'm going to keep my job, I'm going to keep my business and still have kids. And maybe it'll be harder, but it doesn't mean I'm not going to do it because it'll be worth it.
Right. It's important to be grounded in the present, and that's a good pivot in the present. You were an athletic trainer,
Mhm.
and then during the pandemic, you pivoted to professional photography full time. What drove you to change from being into athletic training to what you're doing today?
I have such a special place in my heart for athletic training, and I still work some athletic training events for some companies that are local here, where I get to work with some great athletes, and then USA Taekwondo. I still do a lot of their events, so I still get
Hmm.
to get my feet wet a little bit because it's great.
Yeah.
But athletic training really does put some pretty hard ceilings on the professionals, the medical professionals that are athletic trainers have limited scope to make the type of living that you would, want to make as an entrepreneur, as somebody. So I always kind of knew that my own business was on the cards, and athletics was one of the first things to shut down during the pandemic. And I was seeing people in my field and my colleagues getting furloughed, losing their jobs, like first before anybody else. And I'm like, these are medical professionals, like
Hmm.
time during a pandemic where they're having shortages at hospitals and things. And I know that that's like a different field and that's a different thing, but it was just because you chose to specialize in athletics, all of a sudden you're so limited on what you can do and how you can practice. And so I kind of decided I was going to start my own business. And I'd always been a photographer. I bought my own camera when I was like 14,
Hmm.
babysitting money, it's always something that I've really enjoyed doing. And I've always done it for extra cash. I did it for like textbook money when I was in college, would photograph baby showers and maternities and families. So making the choice to lean into that and do that full time was a decision born out of deciding what I wanted my everyday life to look like, and
Hmm.
like deciding I want the freedom of travel. I want the freedom to still be able to do some athletic training. I would like to be creative. I don't wanna be in an office every day. So it was kind of like this checklist of, like, these things that I wanted, and knowing it would be more difficult for me to do it if, say, I did athletic training, whether it was having my own business with that or working for a team. Some of my time is like a D1, working in that field. During season, you're working 80 hours a
Yeah.
week. There's just no way,
Yeah.
you know?
It's a lot. Right.
And you don't really have time off until it's, like, off season,
Hmm.
and things fluctuate and stuff, but it's like, I can't do both of those things, you know?
Right.
And,
Right. Even harder once you have kids.
yeah, and I just owning your own business in healthcare also as an athletic trainer is usually gonna mean opening some kind of, like, rehabilitation facility or
Hmm.
manual care facility, and no offense to anybody who still participates in sports or does athletics, and they're not at a professional or competitive level, but
Hmm.
I am of the opinion if I am going to dedicate my life to making sure that you feel better and that you're performing at your best, I don't want it to only be this much of your life. So working with general population was a really difficult thing for me to get behind because, like,
Hmm.
no, like, you can make this rehab program for this guy who plays kickball on the weekends, but he's got a full-time job and he's got a family and he's doing all this. And is he actually doing
Right.
his rehab? Probably not. So he's just showing up and expecting you to fix.
Right.
And it's like,
He's not committed. Yeah.
yeah, and it's like, because that's fine. You don't have to be committed to your kickball rehab, the same way you are the rest of your life. But it's like, man,
Right.
if I'm gonna, like, take my time and energy and create these things, I want people to do it. So working with competitive athletes is very different, and I just knew I didn't have the temperament for it to be a sustainable, fulfilling career for me. So that's why I was like,
Right.
let's do, and it's worked out great. I have all this freedom. I can still do athletic training. I can own my own business, and I get to be really creative and really flex those muscles, and it's been, like, the best decision I've ever made.
Yeah. It's win-win. Right. Best of both worlds. Now, both of you being elite athletes, you understand the mindset of dedication and discipline. How does athlete mentality show up in how you handle anxiety? Is that helpful, or do you think it makes it harder?
I think sometimes both, because athletes are conditioned to work hard, like,
Hmm.
not just work hard, bust your ass, and then if you don't get the results you want, you go back, you look at the tape, you reevaluate, and then you work harder. And sometimes when dealing with mental health, you can't white knuckle a situation into submission. You can't say, "Oh, I'm not hard enough on myself. That's why I don't have the things that I want." You have to sometimes say, "Oh, I'm exactly where I am, and I'm exactly where I should be, and I can just accept that." And that's not defeat or failure. I think acceptance has become a little bit of a dirty word with some people that are high performers because it means, "Oh, you're just accepting where you are, but you should be pushing for greatness or pushing," but it's really just sometimes it's just about letting life be life. And it's like, I'm anxious right now and that's okay. I'll just be anxious for right now. And then later I won't be anxious and that'll be fine. It doesn't necessarily mean that you've made a mistake just because something negative in your life has happened. And that's a tough pill to swallow as someone who is an athlete and someone who
Yeah.
constantly wants to be better.
Yes, I'm sure it's got to be tough from a mental perspective. Now, if there's someone out there listening today, they're dealing with anxiety, panic disorder, or eating disorders, or any invisible illness where maybe they feel like their body is betraying them. Nobody can usually see it from the outside. What do you want them to know? What would you say to them?
I want them to know that it's not your fault, even if it feels like all the decisions that you've made have led you here, that you are doing the best you could with the resources that you had at the time, and that's fine. Like, just giving yourself some space. I think it kinda sounds a little silly, and I remember hearing things like that before I truly accepted that. I was just like, "Ugh, but I know the things that I should be doing, and I'm just not doing them."
Hmm.
That just means that the things you think you should be doing aren't necessarily the things that you should be doing. There's more answers out there than what you think you know. And to let go of that idea, like you should have all the answers for yourself, and you can go and you can ask for help and you can seek assistance and professional help. And it's not shameful and it's not you giving up on yourself. It's just trying to learn something new.
Right. And last question I would ask would be, you've dealt with anxiety since childhood. You supported Josh through brain tumors and his brother's death. You're about to become a mom. What's possible when you become or when you build a life around radical acceptance and actually address mental health instead of pretending it's not there?
Oh, I think it opens so many doors. And I even see it now with people in my life where I like would love to shake them and be like, if you would go to therapy and learn how to communicate with one another, none of this would be happening. Things like that. So it's like, but I also have learned that you can't force anybody to do it. They have to be ready when they're ready. Creating acceptance for myself, this radical acceptance, as opposed to like radical accountability, has changed my life in a way that I can give myself space and not punish myself for the things that I feel like I should be doing. And my life has actually gotten better now that I'm not trying to just force it into something anymore. And I think
Absolutely.
that's gonna be really helpful in motherhood because
Yes, it will.
yeah, people are gonna just be people and I can't force a child to fit into any kind of mold or do what I think they should do. And that's I might not have been doing that as aggressively as it sounds, but on some kind of subconscious level, I'm sure I would have either had expectations of myself or had expectations of my child. And just knowing that, like, sometimes it's just a bad day, or sometimes we just need to give people space and let them sort it out. That's huge. That's been big for me.
Absolutely agree. How can people learn more about you? What's your website or how can they find you?
So my website is lauricellaimages.com. And my Instagram is jlauricellaImages. You can find those. If you Google Jackie Lauricella, I did a Breaking the Stigma of Mental Health video years ago that Josh helped me produce. And that was really fun to make. And that was kind of talking more about my mental health journey, um, and encouraging people to go out and get help and ask questions if they have it. So yeah, all those things.
Okay. I'll make sure to include those in the show notes as well. Jackie, thank you very much for being here. This has been very powerful and very helpful. I know this is going to help others as well.
I hope so.
And I would add to the audience is, if you look fine from the outside and you're still struggling the inside, it's valid. Invisible illness is still illness. If you're supporting someone through health crisis while managing your own mental health, you're not selfish for having needs. Caregiver burnout is real. You can't pour from an empty cup. And if you're in a relationship, consider what Jackie and Josh do. Couples therapy every other week, not because something is wrong, but because prevention is easier than crisis management. Radical acceptance, creating space for your partner to be fully themselves without trying to fix them. That's what safe relationships look like. Now, if you're struggling with anxiety or panic, please remember to call or text 988, the suicide crisis hotline. And if it's an emergency, call 911. You're important and you do matter. And remember to share this episode with others because there are others out there that need to hear it. I'm Mike Orlowski. This is Mojo, Motivation and Mental Health. Choose happiness, choose to ask for support, and choose to be extraordinary and get your mojo back. Thank you.